Have you ever been curious to know what happens in the brain at the moment when a person dies? A medical article from 2002 provided an answer. Published in the medical journal named Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience, it stated that brainwaves 30 seconds before the heart stops supplying blood to the brain are identical to the brainwave patterns when a person performs high-intensity cognitive tasks usually. This type of cognitive task could be focusing, memory, or dreaming. The above is said in an academic manner. It might sound a bit difficult to understand, but put simply, it means that at the moment of death, the brain will recall one's entire life. Actually, this is a belated report. Someone had already written about this a long time ago. In 1963, a magazine called Guideposts used a serial method to report a very strange event. Just after a military doctor had officially declared a young 20-year-old man dead, 9 minutes later, as his body was about to be moved to the morgue, a bizarre event occurred. This event changed the life of the young man and many others. So, what exactly happened in those 9 minutes? Today, let's talk about this story. The story took place in December 1943. World War II was beginning to move into the counteroffensive phase. In Tehran, the capital of Iran, the USA, the UK, and the Soviet Union had determined the strategy for the coming year. Allied forces would land in Normandy, France, and raid Nazi Germany from both the east and west. At the same time, the training at Fort Benning in the USA was also in full swing. The North Texas training camp was currently training recruits. About 250,000 new recruits were there. Among them was a young man named George Ritchie, just 20 years old, a private in the Army, and also the main character in our unbelievable story today. From a young age, Ritchie had been a Boy Scout. His dream was to become a military doctor. However, spots for military doctors were very limited, with dozens of people competing for one place. The lucky winner, after completing basic training, would be sent to medical school. Moreover, Ritchie had already surpassed the standards for both academic achievements and physical fitness. He had been slogging through the mud at the North Texas training camp for weeks. The recruit training was about to end, and he just needed to endure one last week before he could receive a train ticket to medical school. However, Ritchie turned out not to be that lucky child. In the last week of training, he suddenly developed a high fever. The camp could only send an ambulance to take Ritchie to the military base hospital. During an X-ray examination, he suddenly fainted. When Ritchie suddenly woke up, he found himself in a small room he had never seen before. There was a bed in the room, and a young man was lying there. At that moment, Ritchie had no mood to glance at the young man lying there anymore. His mind was still preoccupied with quickly getting back to the camp. If he continued to lie in the hospital like this, his chance of becoming a military doctor would surely be gone. Ritchie, burning with impatience, burst out of the room and looked up to see a military doctor approaching. The doctor, head bowed and paying no attention, was heading straight towards Ritchie. Ritchie quickly stepped aside, shouting, "Hey, be careful!" As a result, the military doctor seemed as if he didn't hear or see anything at all. He didn't even look up and quickly disappeared at the end of the hallway. Ritchie stood dumbfounded, not understanding what was happening, but at that moment, he didn't think much. The only thought in his head was to quickly return to the camp and get a train ticket to medical school. Ritchie hurriedly ran out of the hospital gate. It was just midnight, and there was no one on the street. Ritchie ran faster and faster. Then he felt his running speed was even faster than a train. Not just fast, but as if he was flying. Indeed, Ritchie saw that under his feet was not the ground anymore, but dense bushes. He continued running across a large river and numerous towns. He felt that if it continued like this, he could run to any corner of the world. Suddenly, he thought, but I still don't know the way to the camp. I need to find someone to ask for directions. And just as that thought occurred to him, Ritchie also stopped. At that moment, Ritchie noticed he was standing in midair, more than a meter above the ground. Ritchie felt very strange. Oh, why am I like this? Just when he was a bit doubtful, Ritchie realized he was standing on the ground. But at this moment, Ritchie didn't have time to think any further. He discovered he was standing outside a bar in a big city. Under the dim lights, he saw that many people were still happily drinking inside the bar. At that time, a man walked into the bar, intending to push the door open. Richie hurriedly ran to ask for directions. "Hey, sir, where is this place?" The result was that the man didn't pay any attention to him. As if he heard nothing, pulled the door open and went inside. Richie thought that the man probably didn't notice him asking for directions. He followed behind and tapped on the man's shoulder. Unexpectedly, his hand went straight through the man's shoulder. Swoosh! Hitting the air. Richie was really bewildered at this moment. Watching the bar door bang shut, the people inside continued to enjoy themselves. A strong feeling of loneliness enveloped Richie's body. He did not know what to do next. At this moment, Richie vaguely remembered stories he had heard before about the soul leaving the body. Isn't this the state I am in now? Could it be that I have left my body? Richie felt terrified and screamed silently, "It's all over now." Richie frantically turned back. At that moment, he put aside all thoughts about medical school, only wanting to return to his own body. Richie ran furiously back to the hospital on the base. The hospital was very quiet, with only the night nurse and guard moving around. Although the main gate of the hospital was closed, Richie walked through it effortlessly, as if passing through walls. The hospital was very large, and each room housed young soldiers lying there. Richie suddenly realized that he no longer remembered which room he had woken up in. With no other option, he could only search room by room. Finally, in a small room, Richie found a bed. On the bed was a person lying, but the person's face was covered with a white cloth, indicating that this person had died. Only a pale hand was visible outside the cloth, wearing the highest honor badge of a Boy Scout, a metal ring with an eagle design. Seeing the ring that he had worn for many years, Richie was certain at that moment this was indeed his own body. As he walked, he muttered, "Why am I dead yet alive? How am I dead yet still awake like this?" Richie approached the corpse, wanting to pull the white cloth away, but unexpectedly his hand passed through the air, going straight through again. At this point, Richie was very anxious. He continuously tried to pull the white cloth, but all efforts were futile. In this quiet, small room, Richie, in despair, sat huddled in a corner, completely clueless about what to do next. He only felt that even time had become strange. Richie could not remember how long he had been sitting there, whether it was a few hours, a day, a month, or a year. At this point, something even stranger happened. The room began to light up, and the light grew stronger. It was as if a sun was emitting endless light inside the room. Richie felt fortunate that his eyes were not ordinary, for such intense light could blind a normal person in just a fraction of a second. From within the light, the figure of a man gradually appeared. Richie heard a voice ringing in his head. This voice sounded like a command issued by the man, yet also like Richie's own thoughts. From this moment, the light figure and Richie communicated through telepathy. Richie slowly stood up, and from the light figure he felt a strong love and tolerance, a kind of energy he had never felt before. Richie felt that in front of this light figure, all his mistakes and imperfections were forgiven. He felt as if he was standing before a great entity, almost like God. The light figure then posed a question. "What have you achieved?" Richie responded with pride. "My accomplishments have always been great. I graduated with excellent results, was a Boy Scout, and received the Eagle Ring, the highest honor symbol of a Boy Scout." However, as soon as he finished speaking, Richie felt ashamed. He realized that what the light figure was asking about wasn't the achievements in his life, but whether he had ever used his kindness to help anyone. As he looked back at the video of his life, Richie saw that his life was filled with moments revolving only around himself, seldom thinking of others. Richie hung his head in regret, not knowing where to hide his face. The light figure spoke again. "Look at me!" Richie looked up, staring unblinkingly at the light. Suddenly, the surroundings changed rapidly. The entire room and the walls disappeared. Richie and the light figure appeared in a large city. In that large city, Richie saw people all around busy with their lives. Each living person had a faint layer of light clinging to their bodies like a second skin. However, Richie also saw figures without this layer of light. Immediately, Richie understood. The figures without light were the souls of the dead. They still clung to something from their lives. So even after death, They lingered near the people or objects they couldn't let go of. Thinking of this, Richie realized he was standing in a noisy bar. In the bar, besides the drunk crowd, there were many figures without light. Richie realized they might have been regulars at this bar, addicted to alcohol to such an extent that even after death, they couldn't leave this place. At that moment, Richie saw a young sailor, so drunk he stumbled and fell to the ground. A strange phenomenon occurred. A faint light membrane from the sailor's head detached and peeled along his shoulder. Suddenly, a ghostly figure nearby swiftly entered the sailor's body through the spot where the light membrane had peeled off. Richie was shocked to realize that this layer of light was a protective shield for a person. If this light membrane is lost, one could be invaded by foreign spirits at any time. The scene before him changed again. The light figure took Richie to an even more terrifying place. It was a vast plain where ghostly figures formed groups, constantly fighting each other. Although they couldn't touch each other, each spirit was angry, attacking mercilessly. The entire plain was filled with chaotic and brutal battles, never stopping for a moment. Richie was so frightened by this scene that he was left speechless. He felt that these spirits were the lives that, while living, were filled with hatred, desire, and violence. After losing their physical bodies, they were bound by their emotions and fixations, drifting to this place. He couldn't help but sigh. It turns out that hell is not located somewhere far away, but right here on Earth, within our unyielding thoughts. After witnessing this hellish scene, the light figure brought Richie to an entirely new realm. The scenery changed, and before Richie were towering buildings standing amidst a sunny, peaceful, and vibrant park. Between the buildings were vast corridors bustling with people. Inside the buildings were filled with large and complex devices that Richie had never seen before. Here, people seemed unconcerned with the surroundings and were solely focused on their research work. Richie also saw a massive library housing countless books in various fields such as music, technology, science, and many others. The books were varied, some made of paper, some of leather, and other materials that Richie had never seen before. Richie was immensely curious and wondered, "What place is this, really?" He turned to the light figure and instantly received an answer through telepathy. "This is the thought center of Earth." Richie excitedly asked, "The thought center? Is this the heaven that people often mention in legends?" The light figure did not respond but stopped and looked towards a distant direction. Richie followed the gaze and saw a dazzling city, the home of countless superior beings. The city was enveloped in brilliant light. Its walls, architecture, and all the living beings within it were made of light. Richie looked up in awe, thinking to himself, "So this is where the light figure comes from. Heaven." Just as Richie was deeply engrossed in the view, the scenery changed again. Heaven quickly receded at a dizzying speed, eventually becoming a small point of light, then disappearing into thin air. The small room in the hospital and the four walls reappeared around Richie, as if he had never left. Suddenly, Richie felt his mind foggy, his throat burning, and his chest as if pressed by a large stone. Richie struggled to open his eyes and felt something obstructing his view. A voice exclaimed in surprise, "Private, I'm so glad you managed to pull through." From the nurse's account, Richie knew that after he had fainted in front of the X-ray machine, he had been diagnosed with bilateral pneumonia. This was a common disease in the camp, but Richie's symptoms were particularly severe. 24 hours after losing consciousness, Richie's heartbeat disappeared. His heart stopped beating, and the doctors declared him dead. They covered his face with a white cloth and prepared to move his body to the morgue. But just as the orderly came to push his body away, a miracle occurred. Richie came back to life, struggling to pull the white cloth off his face. The miraculous story of Richie's death and revival spread throughout the camp. A few months later, Richie fully recovered and became a military doctor as he had wished. Since then, he shared his bizarre near-death experience with others. However, most people just listened to Richie's story and then politely smiled, walked away, and forgot about it. Richie gradually realized that very few people believed in his story. After World War II, Richie continued his medical studies, became a fully qualified doctor, and later the president of the Richmond Medical Association. He dedicated his life to helping patients, often treating the poor for free. His near-death experience helped him understand the true meaning of life. Ritchie wrote about his experience in a book titled Return from Tomorrow. After publication, the book became one of the bestsellers and was reprinted several times. Ritchie passed away in 2007 at the age of 84. His unusual experience seems to prove that people before dying will recall their entire lives. However, this type of recollection is not from an active brain, but appears to be a mysterious mechanism of the universe. Modern medicine has yet to further study this phenomenon. As Dr. Ajmal Zemar, the researcher in charge, said, "We only obtain EEGs of humans in the throes of dying, but we cannot decode what it shows. It's like receiving a CD without the ability to read the contents inside." Dr. Zemar concluded that the near-death experience is something mystical and spiritual, beyond the current capabilities of modern medicine. He believes that if science can change its approach, perhaps one day we will find the answers. And indeed, spirituality and science currently seem like two paths heading in opposite directions. But if people can change their approach in some way, perhaps these two paths also have the potential to merge. We remember that not a few viewers have left comments about their fleeting and miraculous near-death experiences. We wonder what you think. Do you think a near-death experience is a universal mechanism that helps people recall their entire lives? And why do you think there are special cases who undergo such vivid recollections? What might their purpose be? If you'd like to share your thoughts, please do so in the comment section below this video. And if you find this video useful, don't forget to share it with a friend. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye and see you again.